Yeah, it's probably about time. I will say though, this team has been really frustrating over the last couple years, but if they do make some significant changes this offseason, I'm going to miss them because they were great for content. Okay, welcome back everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about what could potentially be the beginning of the end for the Philadelphia 76ers as we know them. Their season officially ended in the most recent game, a loss to the Boston Celtics. They get swept in the first round of the playoffs, and this has been a really interesting team and franchise over the last couple years. And in this video, I'm going to talk about kind of where I think they're going to go moving forward from this and all the different possibilities after what has been a really disappointing season. But really quickly before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload multiple times per week. Leaving a like rating is a great way to let me know as well that you're enjoying the video, and it helps it out a ton as well. With that said, let's go and get started. Okay, so coming into this season for the Sixers, we didn't really know how things were going to go. It's been a bit of a tumultuous run, I guess to say the least, over the last 2 to 3 years, especially from a front office perspective. There's been a lot of roster overhaul from year to year, whether it's Markelle Fultz being drafted and then traded before his rookie contract was even up as the #1 overall pick, whether it was the Jimmy Butler trade last year and then the Jimmy Butler trade once again in the offseason, the Al Horford signing. There's been a lot of movement, and now it seems like we've kind of hit a point where there's going to be a pause button a little bit on this roster based off how poorly they performed this season, and then especially in the postseason. So let's talk it through a little bit. So you could maybe say that they deserve a little bit of a pass on this first round series against the Celtics because Ben Simmons was injured. Joel Embiid dealt with some injury issues in the seeding games, and they just weren't a complete team. They had to change a lot of the things that they do, especially offensively. Without Ben Simmons on the floor, they ran a lot more ball screen stuff, and it was just a tough adjustment for them. But at the end of the day, when you've got a roster that is paid as much as this Sixers roster is and is as talented as it is, and they still don't perform, they don't even get a single game in the first round, that's going to be a problem. And I think that's really where we have to begin here, and that's at the head coaching spot for Philadelphia. I think it's very unlikely that Brett Brown ever coaches another game for the Philadelphia 76ers, and I don't necessarily think that all of the problems with this team come down to him. I don't think that just by firing him and bringing in a new coach that all their problems are going to be solved, but I think it's pretty clear at this point that he's just not the right coach for this team. And for some people, this is about a year or 2 years too late, but I think Brett Brown is going to be looking for another job. And in terms of the other head coaching candidates out there, it's the same recycled names over and over again. I don't need to really talk about them anymore, but I think that honestly, it's going to come down to the players and the roster construction way more than it is going to be about the coach. Did Brett Brown have plenty of flaws as a coach? Yes, absolutely. There are plenty of offensive things that this team can do better from a game-to-game standpoint to attack the opponent's defensive weaknesses. But really, the thing that I keep coming back to, as I said, is this roster. The fact that Tobias Harris and Al Horford are being paid what they are, and they performed as poorly as they did at times in this postseason series, specifically Tobias Harris, it's a huge issue. And it's an issue that I'm not sure that there is an easy solution to when you consider the payroll numbers for those two players. Because you can talk about, oh, trading this guy, trading that guy, they can get, something in return, they can mix up the roster. But at the end of the day, how much value are you really getting in return for someone like Al Horford or someone like Tobias Harris that are being paid the numbers that they are? It doesn't really seem like that's going to be all that viable of an option. Now, Harris might be a bit of an easier case because he is still young, but his payroll number is so much higher. And then Horford is getting older and declining as well. And then you've got two other max contract players on the roster in Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. And what it comes down to for me is there's just not enough value on this roster. There's not enough production compared to the amount that these players are being paid. I specifically remember a moment in game 3, the Sixers are down 0-2 in the series. There's like a minute left. They're down 4, and they run an elbow pick and roll, an elbow ball screen with Al Horford as the ball handler and Joel Embiid as the screener. And Tobias Harris is making what he is as a perimeter player, and he can't get the ball at the end of the game. Now, that is both an issue with the fact that Harris is being paid that much, but also an issue with the fact that they don't trust him at all to run a play down the stretch, and he's performing as poorly as he is as a perimeter player. So there are some huge roster issues in Philadelphia. And so I think at the very least, we can expect some changes in Philadelphia over the next couple of weeks. As I already said, the head coaching situation is definitely up in the air, and the roster stuff they're going to need to figure out as well. But I think the other part of this is this series shows you really how important Ben Simmons is to this team. As I said, they had to change a lot of the things that they typically do offensively without Simmons on the floor. And you can talk about You know, some of the deficiencies that he has as an offensive player, not shooting threes. He actually attempted a couple in the bubble. But on both ends of the floor, he's such an impactful player, and this team came to rely on him despite his inefficiencies on the offensive end. And it really showed how much they do rely on him in this series for their perimeter creation. You can't just give it to Embiid every time, and the other perimeter creators in this roster are just not good enough, not to mention the impact that he does have defensively. So moving forward, I don't know if we're going to be doing like trade machine stuff on Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons this offseason. Like, I don't know if there's going to be trade rumors for those guys. I'm sure some stuff will come out. Whether it's legitimate, I don't really know at this point, because I think that more than likely what's going to happen here is they're going to get a new head coach, and then they're going to attempt to figure out the Horford and the Harris thing and then move forward from there. Because when you look at what they have on this roster, everybody's going to be back for next season if they want them to. With the exception of a couple of fringe complementary role player guys, the core of this roster is going to be back next season. And if they want to bring all these guys back with a new coach and then maybe try and move Horford or Harris, they can make another run at this thing. There's talent on this roster. They can be a top 4 or top 3 team in the Eastern Conference easily with the amount of talent they have on this team. And we've seen in the past just a simple coaching change make a huge difference. The most specific one I can think of is when the Bucks fired Jason Kidd and they brought in Mike Budenholzer, and the next year they're a 50-plus win team with basically the same roster, just some schematic changes and making guys shoot more threes, empowering Giannis to be the focal point of the offense, and that was a huge difference maker for that Bucks team. Now, I don't know if the same pieces are in place here in Philadelphia. I don't know if they fit as well together as those pieces in Milwaukee did, but we've seen some head coaching changes like that make a huge difference for a couple of teams. So for me moving forward, what I would imagine is going to happen is they're going to fire Brett Brown. They're going to bring in a coach that they think can really help them, especially offensively. I think there's a ton of talent on the defensive end. They have length, they have size, but they've got to figure out a way to get all these pieces to fit together offensively. I think that's what they're going to focus on in their head coaching candidate. And then, like I said, the Harris and the Horford thing, if they can get some kind of value in return, they're probably going to make that move. But if not, they're probably just going to run it back next year and try and just figure out how all this talent can fit together and potentially have a really good year next year. And if that doesn't happen, I think next offseason, the 2021 offseason, will really be the one where we could see some huge monumental changes in Philly and potentially the breakup of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. I think they're still too young, they're still too talented to break up this offseason. You still kind of move some of the pieces around, you find a different head coach, you want to see what it looks like under a different head coach. But if it doesn't work out then after that, I think the offseason of 2021 is where we could really see some huge changes for Philadelphia. And this all just goes back to misstep after misstep for this team. I don't think that this is an indictment of the process or an indictment of tanking or how they went about building this team, because I think they had one of the best collections of assets that the NBA has ever seen on an NBA roster at one point when you're considering draft picks and young talent. They just didn't make the correct picks as often as they needed to, and then they didn't do enough with the assets moving forward that they had. When you're considering the fact that they turned Dario Saric and Robert Covington into Jimmy Butler, into Josh Richardson, they spent all this cap space that they had for years while these players were on rookie contracts on Al Horford, and then they re-signed Tobias Harris to a huge deal, and they gave up multiple picks and a player in Landry Shamet that would fit great on this roster to get Harris, and then he was completely ineffective in a playoff series. So misstep after misstep for the Sixers team, and this is just kind of where it all ended up as a result of injuries, as a result of poor play, as a result of a lack of production from high-priced players, and as a result, unfortunately, of just a bad coaching job by Brett Brown. And I don't think that he's a bad person. I don't even necessarily think that he's the worst coach of all time that the NBA's ever seen, like some people think that he is. It just wasn't going to work in Philly, and they gave him every chance, and I'm glad that they did, because he stuck it out through a lot of tough times there in Philadelphia. But it's time to move on. It's time to find a new head coach, and if that doesn't work out, this could very well be the beginning of the end for the Philadelphia 76ers. And yeah, there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. The next time you guys will see me will be tomorrow. I'm doing a video similar to this, talking about the Brooklyn Nets and kind of where they're going to be going moving forward after their season ended as well. But with that said, thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you all next time.